I'm glad that those of you who are here, because I decided that today we're going to talk about a few different plants that are related or that have some similar like personality traits. And I learned a little bit yesterday about the Indian plum or the oso berry, so that we could learn about that. And I'm really grateful to you out there in Oregon for teaching me about a new plant, because I had never heard of this plant before, and I think it'll be a good lesson for all of us, because we can talk about some plants that we have over here on the East Coast that are similar, that have certain similarities, while we also learn about the plant that you really love a lot. So I want to start off, since you gave me the idea yesterday of talking about the Indian plum, which is also called the oso berry, and I like that. Oso means bear in Spanish and in Latin too, I believe. And I wanted for you to talk to me about the plant in your own words, since you're the one who gave me the idea, and then we can move on from there. How about that?
Sure.
Cool.
You can eat it, and it's kind of sour, but it tastes like a cucumber. If you rub it in your fingers, it smells like a cucumber.
Are you talking about the leaves or the berries?
The leaves.
Cool.
And out here, there's tons of it in the woods if you go on hikes, but it's not, like, you see all the flowers, but there's no berries on them in this season.
But where all the flowers are turn into berries, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So do you eat the leaves and the fruit?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. That's awesome. That's I read a little bit about that. So I'm gonna share a picture so that other people here who have never seen an Indian plum or an oso berry before can see what it looks like, and then we can talk a little bit about it. So this is what is referred to as a thicket. It's like a maybe multiple shrubs, multiple plants of this oso berry plant, all kind of living together. And one of the things that this plant does is it puts out what are called root suckers. So the individual first plant that comes out of the ground, when it sets out its roots, one of the ways that it spreads, and the reasons that you probably see it all over the place, is because one plant can put out new stems along its root, kind of like mint. Mint does that too. Some mint plants shoots them out, and then it looks like you have a totally new plant, but it actually all belongs to the same organism. And I think that's a really cool thing that plants do, especially in the wild, that they don't have to grow from seed. And we, with our human eyes, think that it's a bunch of different plants that are all growing, but it's actually just one. And I think that that's pretty cool about this plant. You can see how it has all these little white. Oh, it's not letting me zoom in. There you go. All these little white things are flowers, and they're hanging off in what are called drupes, right? And the green parts of the leaves, you can eat the leaves. You said that they taste kind of like cucumber, and that's what I read when I was doing a little research today. And that's pretty awesome too, because usually you don't hear about eating the leaves on fruit trees. So that's a really great thing too. And I'm going to type in the Latin name of this, the oso berry. So we have a couple of common names that I'm typing into the chat. So common names are oso berry and Indian plum. And then the Latin name of this is Oemleria cerasiformis. And that's also in the chat if you want to look at how it's spelled. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, as we talk about the Indian plum or the oso berry, I wanted to talk a little bit about a concept in botany, when we're learning about plants and when we're learning about soils, called ecoregions. Has anybody ever heard that word ecoregions before? So it's kind of a fancy way of just talking about the type of place where we live, and categorizing the place that we live into a certain type of plant growth, certain type of maybe weather conditions, and certain types of soils, and the things that we might find growing there. So there are lots of plants that only grow in one type of ecoregion. So I'm going to show you what I mean when I say that. Going to show you a website. And then we can do some interactive learning. Do you have a question, Baron?
No.
Oh, okay. So here we have a map of the United States, well, of all of North America, and all of these colors indicate ecoregions that I was talking about. So where I live over here, bloop, in New Jersey. And I know, Elijah, you live somewhere pretty close to where I live. Jaden, I'm not exactly sure where you are in, what, Jaden, what state are you in?
Michigan.
Michigan. All right, cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome. And oh, we have someone in our chat. Sure. And then Liv, I think you're fairly close to me too, in New Jersey. And then Ileana, what state are you in?
I'm in New Jersey too.
Okay, cool. So we're in 3 different parts of the country, which is pretty awesome, because I'm going to talk about 3 different species, or 2 other species today, that help to show a little bit about what I'm talking about. So here, this is a very like broad, whoops. This is a really broad, oh no, example of what ecoregions are. You out in Oregon, are you close to the coast, or are you like further in to like, so we have here the marine West Coast forest all the way on the edge, and then we have the northwestern forested mountains. Where do you think you guys are?
We're kind of right in the middle.
Kind of right in the middle.
We're in Portland.
Okay.
So it's like right at that point at the border between Washington and Oregon. We're barely in the marine West Coast forest region.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's what I figured. So that makes a lot of sense, and I think there's actually some pretty interesting similarities between where you live and between where those of us in New Jersey live. Where I am has really sandy soil, but lots of other places in New Jersey have much more kind of like clay soil. And oh, this is a close-up of, this goes even deeper into our ecoregions. So as you guys are getting all nerdy and learning about plants like I am, you can try to figure out what plants grow in your area. One of the ways that you can learn more specifically about how to learn new plants, or how to identify plants that you find in the wild, is by figuring out what ecoregion you live in, which one of these places you're in, and then that can help you when you're searching for your answers, or when you're trying to decide, oh, I want to plant something in my garden. What kinds of things will grow in my garden in this place that I live in the world, in this ecoregion that I live in? So I wanted to ask you all if you could give me some information or a definition of the word what it means to adapt. Can someone talk to me about what it means to adapt? Sure. There you go. You're unmuted. Adair, I think it was you, Adair, right?
No, I wasn't raising my hand.
Oh, okay. Jaden, you have information on what does the word adapt mean? To adapt to something.
That means, so say a plant is from Florida, then it would have to adapt to its climate to live to Michigan, and I have to get used to it to actually live there. It is hard for some plants though.
Yeah, that's a good answer. So it would have to get used to living somewhere new. Liv, you have a question, or you have an answer? Oh, I can't hear you. Maybe you can just type it in the chat. I see you've been typing in there. I don't know why I can't hear you. So a little bit about, I think Liv is probably typing. So to talk about like adapting, right? When things change, adapting means that we are changing to different conditions that we live in, right? So right now we're all adapting to this kind of being at home all the time, right? And it's kind of weird, but we're like learning new ways to be in our house and to have fun outside and to do schoolwork online probably and all that stuff. So all of us and a bunch of people all over the country right now are learning how to adapt to a new situation that many of us have never really been in before. So, and we're learning new things, and we're getting stronger, and we're getting smarter, and we're figuring out new ways of being with each other. And all of that is adapting. All of that is adaptation. So plants and plant families, like we've been talking about, do the same thing all of the time. They are plants and seeds that plants create are always adapting to new conditions. And new species, after a really, really long time, new species evolve to completely new conditions. But one of the things that we can do, and the reason that we talk about plant families, is that we follow the patterns in these plants over time and figure out who is related. And like, oh, this species adapted to this new state or this new soil, but it's very closely related to this other plant that grows here. So I'm going to talk about a couple other plants that are sort of related to this osoberry, this Indian plum that we started talking about at the beginning. And then we can talk about maybe different ways that we can use all of these plants in the same way. So Jaden, you have a question?
Yes, can all plants adapt, or that just like some?
So I think that all plants can adapt, sort of, but some plants are more, some plants are hardier. So some words we use are hardy. Some plants like are hardier than others, which means that they have the ability to tolerate larger changes in temperature or larger changes in soil type. So maybe a hardy plant can tolerate sand and clay and silt, and it can tolerate a lot of water, like a lot of rain or a drought. Like that's a hardy plant, and that's a very adaptable plant. And then there are some plants that aren't very adaptable at all, that don't grow in that many places, where they need very specific growing conditions. Maybe we could call them like a little bit weaker, or they're just very, very particular plants. So they'll only grow in sand, or they'll only grow in deep shade in the middle of a forest. So an example that I'm thinking of in my area that is a plant that is very well adapted to where I live is the blueberry plant. So I'm sure you all have eaten blueberries and you all probably think they're delicious and they're super good for you. But I bet you didn't know, or maybe you did know, blueberries really need, they need pretty specific soil conditions. They really like sand. They really like acidic soil. And acidic soil where I live is very common because I have a ton of pine trees around. I live in this area that has lots of pine trees, lots of sand, and used to actually be underwater in this place called the Pine Barrens. So the woods in my area are all full of pine trees and blueberry bushes. And there aren't that many other places other than, well, Maine is like that too. Maine has a lot of blueberries because it's very similar there. So that's one that's like a pretty specific plant, and it's well adapted to its environment. A lot of plants can't survive where blueberries can survive, but it's hard to grow blueberries in a garden environment that doesn't have the right type of soil. I hope maybe that helps a little bit. I think Adair had her hand up first, and then I'll go to Elijah.
Yeah, also, we can't grow it in Oregon, like blueberries much in Oregon, because we have clay soil.
Mm-hmm.
Clay soil.
Yeah. Yeah, so your osoberry or Indian plum shrub probably really likes that clay soil. And I'm going to go to Elijah, and then I'm going to tell you about the plant that grows in my area along my ecoregion that's similar to your Indian plum. So Elijah, what's your question?
Hold on, no, I forget it. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
That's all right. So I'm going to tell you about another, I'm going to show you a new picture of a plant that I have growing in my front yard that I planted, but I planted there because I knew that it would be happy in my sandy soil. And it's called, most people commonly call it just the beach plum. So here's the picture of, this is a picture I'm going to show you of the ripe fruit of the beach plum. So beach plum and osoberry are related. They're in the same family, and it's a very, very big family called the Rosaceae family. It's large, a really, really big family with a lot of different types of fruit trees and berry bushes and things like that that are all related to the rose family. But these, the osoberry and the beach plum are a little bit more closely related, and the flavor of their fruits are very similar. So I wanted to talk about our beach plum here because many of us could probably see them or grow them in our environment with kind of sandy soil. They really like sun more than the osoberry can tolerate. It likes to be on the edge of the woods, and it can kind of tolerate a little bit of shade. Whereas it's called the beach plum because it naturally likes to grow on sand dunes on beaches. But because in our area on the East Coast and maybe in New England, like Massachusetts and Maine, the places where it grows really commonly, the beach plum has actually been gotten rid of in a lot of places. So when houses go up and boardwalks go up and things like that, a lot of times people who are building will take out the plant life. So beach plums aren't that common anymore, probably in the same way that you see your osoberry or your Indian plum all over the place. But I really like the beach plum. Its Latin name, I'm going to put in the chat. So beach plum is the common name of this one, and its Latin name, which you probably can see, is Prunus maritima. Prunus maritima or maritima. And I wanted to tell everybody about this one because this beach plum is adapted to conditions that I can grow in, and it has similar properties, somewhat bitter or sour, but a lot of times people really love making jam out of it, and I bet you could probably make jam out of your oso berries too. I'm going to show a picture of what the oso berry fruit looks like so that you can compare. It's a little bit different, but you can see here what oso berry looks like, and when it's ripe. So it gets to be this deep kind of navy blue, black almost color here. And when it's ripening, it's this kind of like yellow orange color, but I think generally you want to harvest it when it's this color. And I'll show you a picture of what that looks like here. When they're fully ripe, this is what the oso berry or the Indian plum in Oregon looks like. And this is like a bucket of those berries or those little plums that someone has gathered, and then the leaves are in the middle of it. So they're these like long leaves that taste like cucumbers that we can cook. And that's super cool. So do we have other questions before I'm going to do one more species that I think will be good for Jaden, because Jaden probably can't really grow either of those that we've talked about so far, or might not see. These are things that grow in the wild in Oregon and in New Jersey, and along our East Coast. But there's one more that I bet Jaden could find in the wild or grow in his garden. You have a question, Jaden?
Yes. Our place is clay here and sand, and also lots of water, like it floods easy. And I think those little things look like blueberries.
They do look like a little bit like blueberries. They look kind of like grapes, that sort of thing. There's another thing that they kind of look like that I'm gonna show in one of my very, very favorite fruits. I'm gonna do in another class called the Juneberry, and they kind of look like those a little bit too. So the third species that I want to talk about, as we're talking about adaptation and ecoregions today, is a plant that is commonly called just the American plum. So the American plum, before I show you a picture of it, I'm going to show you a map of where it can grow. I think hold on, trying to open it. There we go. You like the American plum. That's cool. So this here is a map. The American plum is a native, it's a small native tree in this whole area that's green here. So probably across a very large part of our country, we can grow that. Jaden, you have a question?
We might just miss it.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, and also I think we might actually have it. I can't remember.
You could probably, even if it doesn't grow like native in your area, it probably you probably can grow it in your garden. And I bet in Oregon you can probably grow it in your garden too. It might just not grow there naturally, because you guys are really excited about it. So I bet you might know about that plant. So this is just where it's distributed most commonly in the wild. And you can usually find a map like this when you're looking up a species of plant to see if it makes sense that you would, be able to plant it or grow it, or that you would find it in your area. So I'm gonna show you a picture of the American plum. These aren't completely ripe. I was having trouble finding a really good picture of the American plum when it was ripe. but this is one of what they look like. So they, in certain ways, they look like they're growing very similarly to the way that the beach plum grows. They will get usually darker, like a darker red or a purpley color, and they're usually bigger. So in size of the fruit, the oso berry is the smallest, but you probably have the most fruit on a tree. And then the beach plum is kind of in the middle, and then the American plum is just a little bit larger. Baron, you have a question?
Oh, no, but we do have it in our backyard.
Yeah, you have American plums?
Yeah,
Do you have more than one, or do you just one?
just
I don't
one.
think we do. We have an Italian plum.
Oh, okay. So you might have a European plum. So there's lots of different kinds of plums, and lots of different species that are related, very closely related to each other, that are called plums. And a lot of times people call them stone fruits. So the oso berry is a stone fruit. Cherries are stone fruits. Plums are stone fruits. Peaches are stone fruits. Apricots, and they're all very closely related. In the way that we talk about plant families. So I also wanted to show you something, if you're interested in like doing more reading and doing more research on your own. A lot of plant species have their own little profiles that the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, has done. And when I was doing research today on trying to learn a little bit about the oso berry, or the Indian plum, I used the USDA guide for that plant, which I can show you.
So you're done for today.
So this is something that I downloaded when I was trying to learn about the Indian plum, because I didn't know very much about it. So it's just a PDF with a lot of information about, and a picture about this particular plant, how you can use it, where you can grow it, how you can grow it. It has a picture of a drawing of what it looks like, maybe some like bugs or pests that it needs. It also talks about environmental benefits. So one of the things that's really great about these native plum trees in the area where they are most commonly grown is that they're really, really great for wildlife. So the flowers of the oso berry are really great for, the flowers come out first thing in the season. So they're like the first flowers in the late winter or early spring that you get to see out there in Oregon. So they're really pretty and they make you happy, and they really make all the pollinators that are really hungry for nectar and to pollinate. They get the nectar from the flowers and they pollinate all of these plants, so that then you get the fruit from them. So that's the same, it's the same for the beach plum. The beach plum is really great food for wildlife and really great for pollinators, and the American plum is the same way. Deer and other wildlife in the woods where American plums grow naturally really get a lot of good food from these plants. So I just wanted to show you this if any of you are interested in doing a lot more reading or a lot more research on any of the plants that we're talking about, especially if they have like fruits or they're good agricultural crops or good crops for wildlife. You can search in the USDA database to get your plant fact sheets. That's one of the ways that you can learn a bunch of stuff from reliable sources. Let's see, do I have any other good pictures? Oh, so I wanted to show you a picture of the bark of the American plum and then the beach plum, so you could see how similar the bark is, because this is another way that you can identify trees that are in the family that are called these stone fruits that I'm talking to you about. A lot of them have bark that looks like this. It's kind of this like deep brownish red, and they have these little dots all over them, right? So you can see That's like a very typical characteristic. It's a pretty thin bark, and it's a really easy way, after you do a lot of studying and a lot of looking into, you know, a lot of different trees, you can start learning what the bark looks like, and then you can identify trees even when they don't have any leaves or flowers or fruits on them. So that's a really great skill to gain. So that's your American plum bark. And then I'm going to show you the bark and the flowers of the beach plum so that you can see how how similar the bark is. So do you see here how it has those same little, it's like a similar color, and it has these little dots all along it, and it's a very thin, you can't tell that it's a thin bark from this picture, but trust me, it's a very thin bark in comparison to lots of other trees. So that's just something to keep an eye out for, and then you'll be like, oh, I wonder if that is a relative of these plum trees that I know about. And one last thing. So remember how we've been talking about common names, and we've been talking about Latin names. And I think it's really important that we always try to learn the Latin names, and we learn a little bit about, we memorize things that way, in addition to the common names. Like we're always talking about like the American plum. I'm not always saying, oh, Prunus americana, because most people aren't going to know what I'm talking about. But if you want to learn this stuff really, really well, and you want to keep studying, one of the things that I learned today when I was looking up recipes, I wanted to see if there were any recipes for the osoberry or for the beach plum that were similar. And I learned that they both are made into jam very often, jelly and jam. And you can like make a sorbet, like frozen dessert with them, that sort of thing. But I also learned that there's another fruit that is commonly called Indian plum. And that is another fruit that I would love to tell you about, that's a native to East Asia, to like Korea, and Japan, that is called Indian plum, and it looks like this. And it's a totally, totally different, unrelated species. So if you say, oh, I love Indian plums, somebody that you meet from another place might be like, oh yeah, I love them too. And then you're actually talking about completely different species, completely different fruits that have different characteristics and that taste totally different. And then people could be confused when you're talking about something. So that's just a tip. Maybe we'll talk about that other type of Indian plum, which has other common names like jujube, and that's what I usually call it, the jujube. But yeah, just a note on that for common names versus Latin names, and making sure that we can know the difference. So we have a couple more minutes. Anybody have a question? Jaden, is that your hand up?
Oh no.
Just keeping the sun out of your eyes. Anybody else have a question? Cool. Oh, Liv, let's see if we can hear you now. Try now.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yay!
What's your question?
So does it have any type of cure for something, or can you use it as medicine like some other things?
So I read that the osoberry, the one in Oregon, Native American people used to, or still do, often use the bark and the twigs for medicinal purposes, for respiratory problems, so like breathing and, like bronchial, lung, throat related issues, and I think for some digestive issues as well. Beach plum, I'm not really sure. So beach plum is the word, the fruit itself, the word that is commonly used is astringent. So that kind of like bitter, like when you put something in your mouth and it's like really dry, astringent means that it's drying. So sometimes we need astringent things to heal various illnesses as well. But I didn't see anything, and I haven't noticed when I've done any research about plums that they have, whether or not they have medicinal action. But there's the peach tree is actually very closely related, and that one has medicinal benefits that we can talk about in another class. I think that's all I got for today. I'm about to run out of time. Again, we have this 40-minute limit. So I'll get back to y'all tomorrow on another plant. I'm not sure what we're gonna do yet, but I have a list to work off of, and I